While it's still more than 18 months until the first ballot is cast in Nigeria's next general election, scheduled for February and March 2027, in spite of this, political activities are already reaching a tipping point across the country, with the traditional powerhouses and their army of supporters dominating news headlines, either for good or bad. The foretaste of their peculiar brand of politics can be felt across social media platforms, mostly in language heavily laced with threats and violence, and within institutions of governance like the National Assembly. Expression of all fundamental freedoms provided for in the Constitution continues to provoke reactions and sometimes over-the-top counter-reactions. Well, for a bit of focus on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Good to have you on Newsday. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you and good afternoon.
Now, some analysts are of the view that the second-term bid of our political office holders across all levels of government is interfering with actual governance. There seems to be a lot of politicking even before the official campaign season kicks off. What are your thoughts on this? How do we explain this?
Well, thank you. I think it's perhaps inherent in electoral democracy of this form that you have what people call endless politicking. And so if you look at the US, for example, as soon as the president is sworn in, midterms begin to stare him in the face or her in the face. So policy considerations, policies are now tested against the backdrop of what happens in midterm. And after midterm, of course, because they have staggered legislative elections, where some almost 1/3 of Congress and senators are up for election every 2 years. That creates for itself a dynamics of endless politics. And many will argue, really, that if you compare, and that's why people think that perhaps authoritarian regimes, people mistake authoritarian regime as the source of economic growth in East Asia, whereas it's because of some sense of stability, not necessarily authoritarianism, but the fact that oftentimes those in power are focused more on governance and less on winning, public praise or politics. So the political circle inherently creates this crisis we're talking about. But here in Nigeria, I think it's going to be really, it's a big trouble because right now, maybe because of oftentimes the season, how intense and how quick people in power start politicking depends also on how the political pressure builds up. So it looks like for Tinubu, it started too early. Once he won election, the Supreme Court, the thing dragged out, and then finally we had a closure, and then issues rise up, the North is not happy, opposition wants to come back and organize themselves. So he is perhaps forced into, politicking, intense politicking, and because the executive attention is scarce, it's finite, it's not endless. If you devote most of it to tracking politics, high-wire politics, then you have less left for development work. And so the question then is, oftentimes it depends on the staffing of the cabinet, and this is the problem. When political leaders, presidents or governors, fill their cabinet with high-profile political actors, those who have either to defend their home turf, those who need to do politics, and less of technocrats and persons who have no skin in the game so much, who are not going to be political assets, and who are not going to be running for election themselves, then even if the president and his political actors in the party are politicking, then there's significant focus of the cabinet on governing. So the consequence depends on the complexity and the composition of the cabinet. If the cabinet is composed mostly of political actors who have skin in the game, who have interests, and who are relied upon by Mr. President to do the heavy lifting of politics, then governance will suffer. It seems to me that's where we are right now.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. But let's touch a little bit on the North, as has been quite a bit of discourse this week, obviously because of the passing of former President Muhammadu Buhari. How do you believe that his demise might affect political dynamics, particularly in the northern region as we approach 2027? Who do you anticipate the party might throw their weight behind to consolidate and, gather support from that very vital demographic of Northerners?
I think President Tinubu played good politics with the barrier. I mean, the emotion was high, the optics was very good, so he went there. Basically, even if there were rifts or some sort of resentment about when Buhari was in power, Tinubu played a good politics and showed a lot of friendship and commitment to the memory of the late president. So I take that for him. Again, Atiku himself also smuggled himself into the game and also played very big in terms of receiving visitors, being part of it, sometimes greeting the crowd and all that. Late Peter Obi made a late cameo appearance, which also was very good. But look, the problem is that these are known. For the past almost more than a decade, we've not, or up to 2 decades, we've not lived without Buhari being present. So now we're going to live post-Buhari politics. And many people could think that there's a Buhari legacy or a Buhari group that will inherit Buhari's so-called 12 million votes. I don't think so. I think that 12 million votes was quite diminished before he died. The president stayed in power, kind of demythologized him, lost him a lot of frantic supporters who were very fanatical, but less so now, who even no longer support him politically. And now he's dead. There's no person of stature who inherit everything. So people talk about Atiku being, of course, we know that towards the end, Atiku got through Pantami and others, and Malami got to see the president, and maybe got some kind of endorsement from Buhari. Of course, Malami and the others, Siriki and others. But really, nobody, Buhari, by his own politics, also was not too invested in creating a legacy that somebody can inherit. It was insular, it was all about Buhari. So I would think that he has opened the knot for contestation. So Atiku will make some foray. The guys in ADC and CPC wing will get there. Tinubu himself will marshal some hard players, the Gandujes and Nuhu Ribadus and several of his governors who are still with him. They will make a play in the north. So it might be interesting that the north might be one of the most open, electoral constituencies in 2027, where both P2B will get some, Tiku gets a lot, Tinubu gets a lot. That's what I think. So for now, it's not true that somebody is going to inherit Buhari. First, Buhari's legacy, Buhari's team was diminishing. Buhari's 12 million votes doesn't exist anymore. And then, of course, now that Buhari is dead, there's nobody of stature. Buhari didn't build that kind of political class, movement that he infused himself in it and kind of sanctify it and blessed it. No, it's going to be free for all. Some will have more. Atiku obviously with the partnership with CPC, Malami and others, will make some inroad. Tinubu will return some stronghold in northern Nigeria. And P2B with the youths could make some play. So we're going to see, in my view, northern Nigeria being a contested terrain politically in 2027.
Now, Dr. Amadi, with endorsement from several quarters, especially for the president, how will party primaries shape the electoral landscape, particularly in terms of candidate selection and party unity?
I think we're trying to re-enter the 2015 landscape with some difference. In 2015, we saw a push by an amalgam of oppositions, APC, the NPDP, of course, Buhari's CPC, Tinubu's party in the Southwest largely, and a rump of ABGA all came together. And the primaries contested but not very intense, and obviously Tinubu with help of Buhari with help of Tinubu somehow ran away with the prize. And after then they worked together somehow. I mean, PDP was clear, no entry for Atiku or anybody. So they stayed in APC, worked hard, and defeated PDP. I think what will happen in 2027, as we're going, it seems to me that we're going to have maybe a 3-horse or 4-horse, as the case might be, race here. Of course, the APC will be the candidate to beat. Tinubu is going to be there. Atiku may finally clinch the ADC ticket if the ADC, does not, think around a younger more charismatic person to take the ticket. And it might be surprising that either P2B gets back to PDP and take the PDP ticket, or P2B goes on Labour Party or stays another party. There will be a P2B in that race. And if P2B doesn't take a PDP ticket, then you might see another surprise of a Southern PDP ticket, in which case you will be 4 strong people running. So my prediction is that it's going to be a much more messy, after the primaries, messy, and after post-primary election. 2015 was very orderly, it was clear. Jonathan and Buhari, it's going to be less so. And margins will count, and that's where Tinubu's effort to get the governor's endorsement, well, even if the governors do not really control all the votes, but the endorsement start to create a sense of fait accompli. So as we build into the primaries, it becomes clearer whether we're going to have a coalition that's strong enough and coherent to topple the Tinubu administration, or we're going to have a coalition that's weak, or no coalition, in which case the ADC becomes just like any other party, just like P2B infused vigor in Labour Party. So Atiku will probably infuse vigor in ADC. They will have a P2B running under ABGA, under Labour Party, under party, and maybe a PDP candidate who might not be that strong, but definitely can shift either the votes from Tinubu or the votes from P2B or the votes from Atiku, depending on the juju politics where the candidate comes from. So it will be a little less predictable than 2015, more messier, and perhaps a little bit intense and violent, not in the sense of blood and tears, but in the sense that we're going to see maxima attack on each other. We're going to see frantic calls. We're going to see all kinds of trickery. So it will be an interesting election 2027.
Yeah, quite a bit of mudslinging we can anticipate. And you just said that Peter Obi has quite a few options in his stable, either to return to the PDP, Labour Party, or stay in ADC. We're yet to see as how that plays out. But one other character in this whole Game of Thrones-esque electoral 2027 discussion is Kwankwaso. I know his name was being thrown out a couple weeks back concerning possibilities of being a vice presidential candidate. What do you make of all these? And where is he exactly? He seems to be quite quiet amongst the host of characters who have been quite noisy, especially amongst this the burial of quite a prominent northern leader.
Well, I think Kwankwaso, like most of the northern strong politicians, are going for 2031, and what that means basically is that he has to either be on a ticket or either be in a place where he can keep Kano. And because Kwankwaso is Kano, that basically looks like the only political currency he has now. Interestingly, since 2023, he has not grown, but somewhat diminished in political stature. Ganduje, who has been with him, gave him some fight, and so the only thing is, would Tinubu pick a Kwankwaso to struggle hard to clean up Kano as a electoral asset, and invest all the VP on winning Kano, which is likely to win without a Kwankwaso on the ticket if he strengthens Ganduje group and also do some deal with Kwankwaso. That's one option. Or we see a Kwankwaso be a vice president candidate not only on APC or maybe on a different party. Kwankwaso has been more than any other person, more, if you like, open to political deals. He could flip to opposition, he could stay with Tinubu, he could move alone. He's just like somebody who is like, trading, who has a gold jewel and is willing to pound it to anyone. So he's not growing in political relevance, but it's still significant because he controls a political state that is big. If APC gets him, then means they could probably clean up to 60% or 70% of the vote in Kano. And the election is going to be very tight. That's really, really important. But how would that compensate for the losses they might have in the Northeast if they push off the incumbent vice president and have Atiku clean up everywhere? Would that compensate for North Central, depending on who is the candidate of the ADC and all that? So I think there's a big political permutation. But my guess is that Kwankwaso will play either a VP or a marginal role like in 2023. He's not going to play a decisive role, but he will either be a makeup for somebody to win or a subtraction for somebody not to win the election.
Dr. Amadi, we've seen endorsement from several quarters. As we said earlier, the APC as a political party has endorsed the president, lawmakers, some governors, they've endorsed President Tinubu for a second term. But I'm wondering what message this sends to Nigerians who are living in multidimensional poverty due to the policies of this administration.
Well, the first message is clear that politics doesn't care about you. I mean, the unresponsiveness of politics is one of the reasons why many people argue that democracy perhaps has an inverse relationship to development. Maybe democracy of the version we have, because in a country that's facing acute crisis of poverty, livelihood, you wouldn't the courage and the daringness, gung-ho character of this endorsement kind of politically lame or politically inexcusable. But again, if you look at Nigerian politics, in more responsive politics anywhere in the world, where perception and feeling of voters translate to electoral defeat or victory, you would be very careful about orchestrating this widespread endorsement that looks to be provocation against the people. But our politics is trapped. First, it's trapped in the fact that it doesn't respond to anything, whether it's economics, psychology, because the electoral process itself is not credible. So if people are angry, the anger may not result in electoral outcome. If people are happy, it may not result. So that's what gives this energy for people to do. Otherwise, with the way the economy is now, what the president will be focusing on is narrative, trying to shift and say we are doing well, trying to win back confidence and not trying to assert a sense of fait accompli. We are, in fact, what they're saying is, look, take it or leave it, we are back in power. Because why? Because the electoral system is dead. It's not responsive. It doesn't respond to how people feel, whether you vote or don't vote. So it's really, we can all be angry at what is going on, but the lesson is very clear that until we construct a real electoral democracy, which is based on the fact that incumbents can easily lose elections if the perception shifts. If we don't do that, we might be in a position where electoral democracy will produce worse outcome than no democracy. And that's been the debate. People point to Asia, point to Lee Kuan Yew was famous on that. We talked about the fact that the Asian culture and some kind of authoritarian rule perhaps is better for development. It's not the nature of the rule itself. It's the fact that in those societies are concerned around some consensus, leaders focus on delivering well-organized, well-supervised public good. But in our own democracy, once they have captured the electoral system, then you are free. There's no penalty. There's nobody going to remove you for not performing. You get removed because you lose control of the apparatus of state politics, the SSS, the INEC, or the police. Once you control these things, then you sit back. You don't care about the fact that people are angry. You don't even change your government. You don't even remove failing cabinet members who you need to remove because they are political assets, and what counts is politics. If our election was very responsive, as political theorists would say, the president would have removed many of the officers. We would have perhaps, the National Assembly would have changed their strategy. The Senate President would have been more responsive and more serious focus on using the National Assembly or creating much more impact from the legislature. But everybody is running around the town, celebrating, in spite of the crisis. Look at this insecurity in the north. If the election was responsive, the focus would have been on the president visiting, talking to generals, commanders, police officers, getting the report of killings and getting reports of how killers or murderers have been arrested, prosecuted. The whole optics will change back to what the people are suffering and how government is helping them survive. But because elections really are not responsive, everybody's talking about the ceremony of power, how we are in charge. Endorsement, fait accompli, we've won already, we are in control. That's really the problem of development in the third world, where the form of our liberal democracy, they remove the function and leave us with the form. And the form is that we have elections that don't actually provide incentive to change political behavior. Don't incentivize those in power to focus on the problem of the people, because the polls, the perception index, do not reflect on electoral outcome at the final call. That's really the tragedy we are in right now.
It is all one grand political pantomime. It's the performance of the democracy. But in speaking of intense political jostling, taking away from governance on the soil, one place that's been a little bit ignored as well is River State. We know the very strong hotbed for campaigning and elections come 2027. What is the future of Sim Fubara? We saw him shaking hands with the president. Not too sure what is to come of that, if he's going to be reinstated. River State seems to be struggling in terms of governance. The people are being ignored while the elephants fight. What do you make of this situation? And for the future, do you think that there's peace now and things will get better?
Well, I think it looks like in Nigeria, the democracy, every administration has a centerpiece or something that basically epitomizes the collapse or the dysfunction of politics. So for Obasanjo, maybe it could be Odi, it could be removal of Fayose and all that. But for Tinubu, I think it's Rivers. And the difference here is, look, when these guys were removed, in whether it is in Fayose or any other person, they fought. They went to court, and either they lost out or they won. But this is the first such brutal, uprooting of democracy that the victim himself, Fubara, and the president are trying to use politics to solve the extremely legal and political problem. So it might look nice that the president, as a deal maker, invites him and they shake hands, but what that does is really to compromise and probably remove a critical issue that this is actually unwarranted assault on democracy. So Fubara's complicity in trying to conduct or create a solution for himself, going back to office, really is a betrayal of the whole sense that people say this is not real, this is a violation of the democratic right of river people. So it would have been nice to have this play out full at the Supreme Court and then maybe a political theater than having Fubara sneak into Villa with Wike and Prince shaking hands. So that's really the first point. The second point is that brutal reality has, if you look at the landscape, Rivers is in a state of confusion. The people, nobody's actually, again, agitating or demanding for anything. The Fubara group is kind of, they don't know what to do. They've lost public street credibility. They can't just come out and say, we are challenging. At the same time, they can't come out euphoric and say, we've won. So it's such a situation where they're just, watching what's going to play out. And Fubara himself has also lost the capacity to demand anything. So it's now all at the grace of Mr. President to either bring him back or to leave him in limbo, castrated, and then hoping for the good sense of the president. And that's actually a picture of our democracy, that oftentimes people, the days of state power confounds, castrate people, and they can't even contest and push. They can't even fight, even if they won't win. And that's what we are, like a defeated people. We just sit back there and hope that somehow God will touch the heart of the president. So what will happen with this in 2027? Well, it looks like the people are not happy. And that's a key point now. If elections, we saw what happened in 2023, the mutilations that were done to the election result, of course, many people who look at the risk script and look at the IRF know that the election result declared were not the right results declared. Would that repeat in 2027? My view is always clear that if people are not happy, they will vote against the incumbent. But if their vote don't count, you get the same result. So I think the people in Rivers are unhappy, but perhaps that they have no options, nothing to do than to wait for Mr. President to exercise good conscience.
Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.